weapon so feared that entire battle strategies were built around avoiding its cutting edge. We've all seen the movies, samurai gracefully wielding their katanas in elegant duels. But Hollywood got it completely wrong. The reality of these weapons was far more terrifying than any film could show. These weren't just swords, they were precision instruments of death, engineered over centuries to be the most efficient killing tools ever created. The samurai's sword wasn't just deadly, it was the deadliest weapon in human history. And the reasons why will absolutely blow your mind. From the mystical steel folding techniques that created supernatural sharpness, to the combat methods that could end a fight in milliseconds, we're about to uncover why these blades dominated battlefields for over 1,000 years. But here's what's really going to shock you. The metallurgy miracle that created death. Let's start with something that would make modern engineers weep with envy. The metallurgical mastery that turned raw iron into instruments of supernatural cutting power. What Japanese swordsmiths achieved in their forges was so advanced that we're still struggling to replicate it today. The secret began with tamahagan, a mystical steel created through a process so complex it bordered on alchemy. Master smiths would spend 3 days and nights in continuous meditation-like focus, managing furnaces that burned at precisely the right temperature to transform iron, sand, and charcoal into something that transcended ordinary metal. But here's where it gets incredible. They didn't just make one type of steel. Each katana contained up to 4 different steel types, each with specific properties layered and folded in patterns that distributed hardness and flexibility exactly where needed. The cutting edge was made from hagane, ultra-hard steel that could achieve sharpness we can barely measure. The spine used shingane, softer steel that prevented the blade from shattering on impact. Picture a blade that's simultaneously harder than modern razor blades and more flexible than a whip. That's not supposed to be possible according to metallurgy. Yet somehow these medieval craftsmen achieved it. The folding process alone was mind-blowing. Master smiths would fold the steel up to 16 times, creating thousands of microscopic layers. This wasn't just about strength. It was about creating a molecular structure so perfect that the blade could maintain its edge through countless battles while never breaking. Modern attempts to recreate these swords using contemporary technology have largely failed. We can analyze the molecular structure, understand the carbon content, map the crystalline formations, but we can't duplicate the results. Something about the combination of technique, timing, and perhaps pure artistry created metal properties that modern science struggles to explain. The differential hardening technique, Hayman, created a blade with a hard cutting edge and a softer spine in a single piece of steel. The swordsmith would cover the blade in clay mixed with charcoal powder, leaving the edge exposed, then heat treat the entire weapon. The exposed edge cooled rapidly, becoming incredibly hard while the clay-covered spine cooled slowly, remaining flexible. This created the signature curved shape that made katanas so deadly. The curve wasn't decorative. It was a natural result of the differential cooling that also made the blade biomechanically perfect for cutting. The curve matched the natural arc of a human arm swing, maximizing cutting power while maintaining perfect balance. Temperature control was so precise that smiths could judge furnace heat by the color of flames and the sound of burning charcoal. A difference of just a few degrees could ruin months of work. These craftsmen developed senses so refined they could feel metallurgical changes through subtle variations in hammer strikes. The final polishing process took weeks, progressing through increasingly fine stones until the blade achieved a mirror finish that revealed the Hayman line, the visual boundary between hard and soft steel that proved the differential hardening had succeeded. But what made these blades truly supernatural wasn't just the metallurgy, it was how this incredible engineering translated into cutting performance that defied belief. We're talking about weapons that could slice through armor, bone, and multiple bodies without losing their edge. Blades so sharp they could cut falling leaves, yet so resilient they could clash against other swords hundreds of times without chipping. Could you imagine holding a weapon so perfectly engineered that it felt alive in your hands? A blade that responded to the slightest pressure, that could transition from delicate precision cuts to devastating power strikes without any adjustment. Before we dive into the terrifying cutting tests that proved these weapons' deadly superiority, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Because what we're about to reveal about samurai sword testing methods will make you understand why these weapons struck terror into the hearts of everyone who faced them. And if you think the metallurgy was impressive, wait until you discover how they tested these blades on actual human bodies, the horrifying test cutting that proved deadly superiority. Now we enter the darkest chapter of samurai sword history, the systematic testing that proved these weapons' lethal superiority through methods so brutal they'd be considered war crimes today. What we're about to discuss isn't theory or legend, it's documented historical practice that reveals the true horror of these perfectly engineered killing tools. Tameshigiri, literally test cutting, was the formal process of evaluating sword performance using actual human bodies. This wasn't occasional or ceremonial, it was standard quality control that treated human corpses like industrial testing materials. Master swordsmiths and samurai regularly purchased condemned criminals' bodies to conduct these gruesome experiments. Picture this scene. A recently executed criminal's body is positioned precisely, and a master swordsman approaches with a newly forged katana. With a single fluid motion, the blade slices through flesh, bone, and organs so cleanly that the upper torso slides away from the lower body without any resistance. The cut is so perfect that onlookers sometimes don't realize the strike has occurred until the body parts separate. The testing hierarchy was methodical and horrifying. Different cuts had specific names and difficulty ratings. Okesa involved cutting diagonally from shoulder to opposite hip, slicing through ribs, organs, and spine in one motion. Kiryotoshi meant decapitation with such precision that the head would fall cleanly without any tearing or jagged edges. But the most feared test was Ryodan, cutting a body completely in half horizontally at the waist. This required blade sharpness and technique so exceptional that only legendary swords could achieve it. The blade had to slice through spine, organs, and dense abdominal muscles without binding or deflecting, maintaining perfect cutting geometry throughout the motion. Master swordsmen competed to achieve multiple body cuts. Historical records document blades cutting through 2, 3, even 4 stacked bodies in single strikes. Imagine the precision required. The blade had to maintain perfect sharpness and structural integrity while encountering bones, varying tissue densities, and the massive resistance created by multiple human torsos. The testing wasn't just about cutting. It was about analyzing exactly how efficiently the blade killed. Testers evaluated whether cuts were clean or ragged, how much force was required, whether the blade maintained its edge after multiple strikes, and crucially, how quickly and completely each cut would incapacitate or kill a living opponent. They documented everything with scientific precision. Which angle of attack produced the cleanest decapitation? How did blade curvature affect cutting through different body parts? What grip and stance maximized cutting power while maintaining control? This was engineering research conducted with human corpses as test materials. The psychological impact on observers was deliberately cultivated. These demonstrations weren't just quality control. They were psychological warfare designed to terrorize potential enemies. Witnesses would spread word about blades that could effortlessly dismember human bodies, creating fear that preceded samurai into battle. Some tests used living prisoners to evaluate blade performance under combat conditions. Condemned criminals would be positioned and struck down to test not just cutting ability, but how effectively the sword could kill quickly and cleanly. The goal was determining which techniques and blade geometries produced instant, irreversible death. Master swordsmiths developed specialized cutting blocks made from compressed materials that simulated human tissue density. But nothing replaced actual human bodies for final testing. The complex layering of skin, fat, muscle, bone, and organs created cutting challenges that no artificial substitute could replicate accurately. The testing revealed capabilities that seem impossible. Historical accounts describe blades cutting through armored opponents so cleanly that they didn't realize they'd been struck until body parts began separating. Warriors would continue fighting for several seconds after being cut in half, not immediately aware that they were already dead. Different sword schools developed specialized testing methods matching their combat philosophies. Some focused on single, perfect cuts that would end fights instantly. Others tested rapid, multiple strikes that could dismember opponents piece by piece. Each approach required different blade geometries and metallurgical properties. The data collected from these horrific experiments was systematically analyzed and incorporated into sword design improvements. Each generation of blades became more efficient at killing based on lessons learned from systematic human testing. This wasn't random violence. It was methodical weapons development using human subjects. European and Chinese weapons were occasionally tested using the same methods, and the results were consistently inferior. Other cultures' swords would chip, bind, or fail to achieve clean cuts that Japanese blades accomplished effortlessly. This comparative testing proved the samurai sword's deadly superiority wasn't legend, it was measurable fact. Could you imagine living in a world where weapons testing involved systematic dismemberment of human bodies, where the efficiency of killing was analyzed with scientific precision, where blade quality was measured by how cleanly it could slice through human torsos? But the horrifying test results were just the beginning. The real terror came when these perfectly engineered killing tools met actual battlefield conditions, where their deadly efficiency created carnage that witnesses described as supernatural. Battlefield carnage that seemed supernatural. The true horror of samurai swords wasn't revealed in controlled testing. It exploded across battlefields where these weapons created scenes of carnage so devastating that witnesses believed they were seeing supernatural forces at work. What we're about to explore are documented battlefield accounts that reveal why these weapons earned their reputation as the most deadly in human history. Picture the Battle of Dan no Ura in 1185. Master swordsman Minamoto no Yoshitsune faces multiple armored opponents simultaneously. In a combat sequence lasting less than 30 seconds, he cuts down 7 fully armed warriors. Witnesses described his blade moving so fast it seemed to multiply, creating multiple simultaneous cuts that severed limbs, opened torsos, and decapitated enemies in fluid motions that defied human physical limitations. But here's what made it truly terrifying. The katana's cutting geometry was so perfect that opponents often didn't immediately realize they'd been struck. Historical accounts describe warriors continuing to attack for several seconds after suffering mortal wounds, their bodies not yet understanding they were already dead. The curvature and balance created what modern biomechanics recognizes as the perfect cutting tool. The blade's curve matched the natural arc of human arm movement, allowing swordsmen to generate maximum cutting speed while maintaining precise control. Unlike straight European swords that required thrusting motions, the katana delivered devastating cuts through natural body mechanics. In group combat, a master swordsman could create what witnesses called circles of death. The katana's design enabled continuous cutting motions where each strike seamlessly flowed into the next without pause. A single warrior could engage multiple opponents simultaneously, using circular cutting patterns that kept the blade in constant lethal motion. Master swordsman Miyamoto Musashi documented creating his own battlefield style that maximized the katana's deadly efficiency. His two-sword technique used a katana and wakizashi simultaneously, creating overlapping cutting zones that made defense virtually impossible. Opponents faced continuous attack from multiple angles with no safe distance or defensive position. The most terrifying aspect was the silence. European battlefields were chaos of clashing metal and screaming. Katana combat was often eerily quiet. The blades cut so cleanly through armor and bodies that there was no metallic clash. Just the whisper of steel through air followed by the soft sounds of bodies falling apart. Armor proved almost useless against properly wielded katanas. The differential hardness allowed the cutting edge to maintain sharpness while the flexible spine prevented breaking when striking hard surfaces. Blades would slice through metal plates, chainmail, and layered fabric as if they were paper, reaching the soft human targets beneath. The speed of katana techniques created temporal distortions in combat. Master swordsmen moved so quickly that opponents couldn't track the blade's position. Witnesses described seeing a swordsman standing motionless, then suddenly multiple enemies would collapse in pieces with no one able to explain when or how the attacks occurred. Historical records from the Mongol invasions describe Japanese defenders using katanas to devastating effect against Mongol cavalry. Single samurai would charge into groups of mounted warriors and emerge moments later, leaving behind horses and riders cut into pieces. The Mongols, experienced in warfare across Asia, had never encountered weapons that could create such efficient killing. The blade's engineering created acoustic signatures that terrified opponents. The perfectly balanced steel produced a distinctive whistle when cutting through air at high speed. Enemies learned to fear this sound, knowing it preceded inevitable death. Some warriors would flee upon hearing the whistle of an approaching katana. Perhaps most horrifying was the weapon's reliability. European swords would dull, chip, or break during extended combat. Katanas maintained their cutting edge through entire battles, remaining as deadly at the end as at the beginning. Warriors would find their weapons growing more effective as combat continued, the blade seemingly improving with use. The combination of perfect metallurgy, biomechanically optimized design, and centuries of refined technique created weapons that transcended normal military equipment. They became extensions of their wielders' bodies, capable of performance that seemed to violate physical laws. But even these battlefield horrors pale in comparison to what made katanas truly unstoppable. The combat techniques that turned already deadly weapons into instruments of impossible destruction. Combat techniques that made death inevitable. Now we dive into what made katana wielders truly unstoppable. Combat techniques so refined and devastating that facing a master swordsman wasn't just dangerous. It was essentially a death sentence executed with mathematical precision. These weren't just fighting styles, they were systematic methods for turning human bodies into disconnected pieces. The foundation was Ma-I, the precise management of distance and timing that turned every combat encounter into a calculated execution. Master swordsmen could judge the exact moment when opponents entered their killing zone and deliver fatal strikes before enemies could react. This wasn't reflexive fighting. It was premeditated murder disguised as combat technique. Picture facing a katana master. You're approaching what seems like a safe distance when suddenly you're missing an arm. The strike occurred faster than your nervous system could process, delivered at the precise instant you entered the blade's range. The swordsman calculated your movement speed, predicted your attack timing, and killed you before you knew the fight had begun. Kiryatoshi, the simultaneous attack and defense, created scenarios where blocking or parrying became impossible. As opponents attacked, katana masters would deflect incoming strikes while simultaneously delivering killing blows. There was no separation between defense and offense. Every defensive move contained a lethal counterattack. The most terrifying technique was sen no sen, attacking the opponent's intention before they could act on it. Master swordsmen developed psychological awareness so refined they could read opponents' intentions through subtle body language, then deliver killing strikes before attacks were even initiated. They weren't responding to attacks. They were murdering people for thinking about attacking. Zanshin, the state of continued awareness, meant the fight never truly ended until all threats were eliminated. Even after delivering what appeared to be killing blows, masters remained in perfect cutting position to immediately strike again. Opponents who survived initial attacks found themselves facing continuous flowing cuts until they were completely dismembered. The circular cutting patterns, enshin, created perpetual motion-killing techniques. Each cut generated momentum for the next strike, allowing masters to maintain continuous attack without pause. Opponents faced endless cutting motions where defending against one strike only positioned them perfectly for the next cut. Nukitsuke, the lightning-fast draw and cut, could kill opponents before they realized a sword had been drawn. Masters practiced until they could draw their blade and deliver killing strikes in single motions lasting fractions of a second. By the time opponents saw the katana, they were already dead. But perhaps most devastating was kokyuho, breath control techniques that synchronized cutting motions with breathing rhythms. This created supernatural stamina and precision, allowing masters to maintain peak cutting performance through extended combat while opponents exhausted themselves. The training methods that developed these techniques were so extreme they'd be considered torture today. Students practiced cutting motions thousands of times daily until muscle memory operated faster than conscious thought. They developed neural pathways that bypass normal human reaction times, essentially becoming killing machines guided by unconscious precision. Tameshi Giri wasn't just testing blade sharpness. It trained swordsmen to cut through human bodies with specific techniques that maximized damage. They learned exactly how to angle strikes to slice through bones cleanly, how to generate maximum cutting power while maintaining balance, and how to transition between multiple cuts without losing momentum. Masters developed situation-specific killing techniques. Kiruku for cutting down mounted opponents, targeting specific points where armor joints allowed blade penetration. Kesagiri for maximum damage against multiple opponents, using diagonal cuts that could slice through several enemies in single motions. The psychological warfare component was deliberately cultivated. Masters would demonstrate their cutting techniques on condemned criminals before battles, showing enemies exactly how they would be dismembered. This wasn't intimidation, it was preview footage of opponents approaching deaths. Training included scenarios specifically designed to make killing inevitable once combat began. There were no non-lethal katana techniques because the weapon and fighting methods were engineered exclusively for efficient murder. Every motion, every stance, every breathing pattern was optimized to end human life as quickly and completely as possible. Hiyoshi, timing and rhythm control, allowed masters to manipulate opponents' movements like puppeteers controlling marionettes. By controlling combat rhythm, they could force enemies into positions where killing strikes became unavoidable. Opponents would find themselves moving exactly where the swordsman wanted them, directly into perfectly timed cuts. The integration of physical and mental training created warriors who operated beyond normal human limitations. They could maintain peak performance while experiencing the psychological stress that would incapacitate normal people. Combat became a meditative state where killing occurred through pure technical excellence rather than emotional response. Could you imagine training so intensively that your body could kill people faster than your mind could process what was happening? Where your muscles would execute perfect cutting techniques while your consciousness wasn't even fully aware combat had begun. But the techniques were just one element of a larger system. The true horror becomes complete when we examine how the katana's design integrated with these methods to create the perfect killing system. Why modern weapons still can't match this ancient terror. Here's what should terrify us most. Despite centuries of technological advancement, despite computer-aided design and modern metallurgy, we still can't create weapons that match the pure killing efficiency of the samurai sword. This ancient technology remains unsurpassed in its specific deadly purpose, and the reasons why reveal something disturbing about human engineering capabilities. Modern military weapons are designed for different purposes, maximizing casualties across distances, penetrating armor, or creating suppressive fire. But for the specific task of efficiently killing individual opponents in close combat, nothing we've invented surpasses the katana's biomechanical perfection. Consider modern combat knives. They're made from superior steel alloys with better corrosion resistance and more consistent manufacturing. But they can't maintain the katana's combination of edge retention, flexibility, and cutting geometry. Modern knives are tools. Katanas were engineered specifically as killing instruments with no other purpose. Contemporary sword replicas, even those made with advanced metallurgy and computer-controlled manufacturing, consistently fail to replicate the original's performance characteristics. We can analyze the molecular structure, map the carbon distribution, and understand the crystalline formations. But something about the original craftsman's techniques created properties that modern science can't duplicate. The katana's curved geometry hasn't been improved upon because it can't be. The specific curve mathematics match human biomechanics so perfectly that any modification reduces cutting efficiency. 800 years of weapons development haven't found a better solution to the problem of maximum cutting power through human arm motion. Modern military training emphasizes firearms and technological weapons, abandoning the intensive close combat conditioning that created katana masters. We've developed soldiers who can operate complex weapons systems but lack the physical and mental development that made ancient swordsmen into perfect killing machines. Even special forces knife fighting techniques developed with modern understanding of anatomy and biomechanics don't achieve the systematic lethality of traditional katana methods. Contemporary combat training focuses on practical application rather than the transcendent skill development that created legendary swordsmen. The psychological conditioning that created katana masters is impossible to replicate in modern military training. The lifetime dedication, the spiritual discipline, and the complete mental restructuring required to achieve mastery violate contemporary understanding of human psychology and training ethics. Perhaps most significantly, we've lost the cultural context that made such weapons possible. The society that created katanas existed in a state of constant warfare where personal combat skills meant survival. Modern warfare occurs at distances that make individual fighting prowess largely irrelevant. The metallurgical techniques remain partially mysterious because they were developed through intuitive understanding rather than scientific analysis. Master swordsmiths felt metal properties through hammer strikes and judged temperatures by flame color, sensory abilities we can't replicate with instruments. But here's the uncomfortable truth. We probably could recreate katana-level weapons if we were willing to accept the costs. The training methods, the cultural dedication, the systematic approach to creating perfect killing tools. We understand the requirements. We choose not to pursue them because the human cost would be unacceptable. Modern weapons excel at their intended purposes, killing efficiently at distance, penetrating modern armor, or neutralizing multiple targets quickly. But for the specific scenario of single combat between individuals, the katana remains the ultimate solution to an engineering problem we no longer consider worth solving. The samurai's sword represents humanity's most successful attempt to create the perfect individual killing tool. Every aspect, metallurgy, geometry, weight distribution, and fighting techniques, was optimized for one purpose: ending human life as efficiently as possible in personal combat. And that's exactly why these weapons were the deadliest in history. Not because they were magical or supernatural, but because an entire civilization dedicated centuries to perfecting the art of killing with edged weapons, creating tools and techniques that remain unsurpassed in their deadly specialty. The samurai sword was proof of what humans can accomplish when an entire civilization focuses centuries of effort on creating the perfect killing tool. While other cultures built monuments or advanced philosophy, feudal Japan systematically engineered better ways to dismember human beings, achieving metallurgical mastery we can't replicate today. The katana became exactly what they intended: the ultimate individual killing device, so perfectly engineered that 8 centuries later we still can't improve upon their design. But the same species that created the perfect killing sword also created vaccines, global technologies, and transcendent art. We have the capacity for both creation and destruction. What modern technologies match the katana's focused perfection? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if this made you appreciate both human ingenuity and our choices, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history's mysteries.